Conservatives keep losing. The left controls media, universities, and government. How can conservatives be effective, and how can they win?
They have to tell a better story. Fundamentally, that's it. And then I think not only do they have to tell a better story, they have to act out a better story. That's the same with religious believers. It's like, you want your God to win? It's like, get your act together, right? You be a shining light on the hill for your faith. And then that's how you win, and we shouldn't even be thinking about winning in some real sense. We should be thinking about how to make things better. And so the conservative question is, how could we be more effective at making things better than those who don't abide by the traditions we regard as valuable? And that's the real question. It's very, very difficult to sort that out. One of the things, I didn't know that I was a conservative before everybody started telling me that I was, but apparently I am. So, and one of the benefits of that is that there are conservative stories that are quite compelling, and they haven't been told well for quite a long time. And one of maybe the core story that's compelling on the conservative side is something like that meaning and responsibility are integrally linked. And that's not a story that's been well told in our culture for at least since the mid-60s. It's just not told at all. And I've noticed that story has a universal impact on the audiences that I've been addressing, to walk people through the notion, for example, that if you find yourself in dire straits at some point in your life, that one of the arcs that you might have managed to build yourself will be constructed of the social relations made possible by the people for whom you took responsibility. And everyone understands that as soon as you lay it out. It's like, well, of course that's going to be the case, obviously, right? If you have been a credit, if you have conducted yourself credibly in the eyes of the people you've interacted with, the probability that they're going to be hungry for the opportunity to reciprocate is very, very high. And so one core conservative message is something like meaning through responsibility. And that's a very, very deep message. I mean, that's the idea of bearing your cross. It's the same idea. It's that the deeper the responsibility, the more radical the meaning. Radical in terms of its capacity to transform and sustain. And I think that's just true. It's sort of, as soon as you think it through, you understand it's true. And it's quite the crazy idea, that your life would deepen and broaden in precise proportion to the degree that you were willing to take radical responsibility. And that's something you can experiment with, and that's a message conservatives should and could and should deliver, but also, more importantly, act out. Right? That's the fundamental issue, is the acting out. And I think that young people they're literally dying for that message, because we are in a meaning crisis in some real sense, cataclysmic consequence of the death of God, let's say. What should orient you in life? It's, well, certainly the willingness to dare to accept radical responsibility. That's a good answer to the question of how do you find meaning in life? You could try just doing the best you possibly can for other people. And I don't mean in a sense of bitter self-immolation, That's not going to sustain itself. It's not a good strategy. But you could just try that and see what happens. It's like, you kind of know what's going to happen, because there'll be people who take advantage of you. but they even might learn with time. Anyone capable of shame is certainly going to be shamed by the realization that they've betrayed someone who's been good to them. And insofar as they have any capacity for shame whatsoever, even the worst of people can find a pathway to redemption through that kind of shame, but that won't even emerge unless there's been someone who was good to them that they could betray. Now, one of the things that struck me from reading Carl Jung, again, Swiss psychoanalyst who was a stunning genius, he believed that he was very obsessed with what had happened in Germany in the 1930s and the 1940s, and then also with the emergence of the potential for nuclear annihilation after the Second World War. And his hypothesis was something like, we have to become as good as we are technologically powerful. And right now we're more technologically powerful than we are good. And he believed that was in part because our technological enterprise had expanded in some sense exponentially since the dawn of the scientific revolution, but that our ethical wisdom had stagnated, or, well, stagnated is good enough, and that's not acceptable, because as you become more powerful, you better become better, because otherwise that power your foolishness you'll be unable to control the power that you've developed, and it will turn against you as a consequence of your own sin. That's a perfectly good way of thinking about it. And so that struck me as highly credible, especially after I'd read a lot about totalitarian states and the fact that the reason totalitarian states can maintain themselves, so that would be definitely the use of power against our own power against ourselves, the totalitarian state. The reason those states sustain themselves is because every individual in those states lies about everything all the time. So it's a direct consequence of individual sin. Now, that's not all it is, but that's a lot of what it is, that's for sure. And so I felt that the pathway forward into a world of unlimited human technological ability was through the radical renovation of the individual psyche, as radical a renovation as the technological renovation itself. And we're playing that out now. We're going to find out, probably in the course of most of our lifetimes, whether or not we can manage that. And we're pretty technologically powerful, and we're getting more technologically powerful all the time, and very, very quickly. And so that means we better get better fast at the same time. And and the heartening thing, I would say the heartening thing in that is that, that's not a matter of just constraining yourself, because people think, well, how dull it is to be good. There's all these things that I would like to do that I no longer can. It's all constraint and walls. It's all regulations and rules. And conservatives can come across as people who promote that viewpoint. It's all about constraint. But that's not right, because there isn't anything more adventurous than being good, and there isn't anything better than adventure. And you might say, well, why is being good an adventure? And one of the answers to that is, well, it's really difficult. And so that's a plus. It's difficult in a voluntary sort of way. It means you have to take yourself in hand, right? And that's a challenge. But maybe you want a challenge. It seems that you want a challenge. And you might observe that part of being good is saying what you believe to be true. And you might say, well, why is that an adventure? And the answer is, well, you don't know what's going to happen if you tell the truth, right? Whatever happens when you tell the truth is whatever's going to happen when you tell the truth. You have to let go of the outcome. It's an act of faith. You have to presume, if you're going to tell the truth, this is a very strange thing. If you're going to tell the truth, You have to presume axiomatically that whatever happens when you tell the truth is the best thing that could have possibly happened, sort of regardless of what happens. And because sometimes you get in trouble for telling the truth. In fact, that's why children lie, right? Almost always. They lie because they don't want to get in trouble. And then you might say to them, well, they might object, well, why shouldn't I lie? Because I just get in trouble if I told the truth. It's like, well, the answer is because you'll get in a lot more trouble if you lie. It'll just take a lot longer to manifest itself. But when it does, it'll be way worse. And so you might as well take your lumps while the hand that's delivering the blow is still relatively mild, rather than store it up and wait for the crushing blow that will definitely come for you if you stack up enough lies. And so you tell the truth because you presume that whatever manifests itself as a consequence of the truth is the habitable order that is good. That's also an axiom of the belief in the Logos, is that truth sets you free. And the alternative to believing that is to believe that falsehood sets you free. It's like, fine, try it out. Well, what we saw in the 20th century is that if falsehood rules, then you have a totalitarian state. That's the definition of a totalitarian state. Everyone lies about everything to everyone all the time. And that's hell. And you might say, well, I don't believe in hell. It's like, well, have it your way. Visit North Korea and see if it's real. It's real enough. And you might say, well, it's not eternal. It's like, well, you'd feel like it was if you lived there. So, and I'm not so sure it's not eternal in some more fundamental sense as well, because it's always a place we could go. And it's always there as a possibility. So, and I don't know what that means in the final analysis, but I know what it means practically and politically, in a tangible sense. So